Picture this scene with me. It's early December, 1993. You're standing on a shattered street in Sarajevo, in what used to be a functioning middle-class neighborhood. Your neighbor approaches you. He was a banker before the siege. He wears a coat 3 sizes too large, and his cheeks are hollow. In his trembling hand, he holds a gold necklace. It's real 24-karat gold, probably worth 2 months of his old salary. But he's not asking for money. He's begging for 3 disposable lighters and half a pack of cigarettes. You make the trade. He walks away clutching those lighters like they're diamonds, because in this frozen city with no electricity, no gas, no running water, that gold necklace is just decorative metal. But those lighters, they represent fire. Fire means boiled water so his children don't die of dysentery. Fire means warmth, so they survive another night. Fire means he can cook the scraps of food he scavenged. That necklace won't save his family, but fire will. This isn't a screenplay. This was documented testimony from a man named Selko Begovic. He survived over a year trapped in that siege. And here's what keeps me awake at night. He watched people with gold starve to death, while people with practical skills and everyday tools thrived. The conventional wisdom in prepper circles says stack gold and silver bars. If you don't hold it, you don't own it. I've repeated that advice myself. But when we forensically examine what actually happens during total economic collapse, not theory, but documented historical reality, gold ranks far below something else entirely. Skills, land, tools, community networks. What the Amish have understood for 300 years. By the end of this investigation, you'll understand why $1,000 investment in the right practical goods will save your family, while $10,000 in gold bullion won't even buy you dinner. Let me show you the pattern, because this catastrophe has happened before, multiple times across multiple countries, and the ledger tells the same story every single time. The first pattern. Currency collapse happens faster than anyone believes humanly possible. In Bosnia, the transition from a functioning money-based economy to pure survival barter took months, not years. Not a gradual decade-long decline. Months. Selko documented how in the early days of the siege, people still tried using Yugoslavian dinars. Within weeks, prices multiplied by factors of 20, 30, then 100. A single pack of cigarettes that cost 1.5 German marks outside the war zone cost 40 marks inside the siege perimeter. The currency hadn't just inflated, it had vaporized. Now jump forward to Venezuela, 2016 to present day. Inflation exceeded 1 million%. Let that number actually register in your mind. 1 million% inflation. The bolivar became so worthless that Venezuelans started calling it the bolivar muerto, the dead bolivar. Citizens used stacks of bills as napkins because they were cheaper than paper towels. The government's response was even more brutal. They removed high-denomination bills from circulation overnight. Citizens were given 72 hours to exchange currency that was being declared illegal. 72 hours. Imagine your entire life savings. You have 3 days to convert it before the state declares it worthless paper. No extensions, no appeals. Comply or lose everything. Argentina faced the same pattern between 1998 and 2002. The economy contracted by 28%. More than 50% of the population fell below the poverty line in under 4 years. Those who had denominated their savings in pesos experienced devastating, generational losses. Same pattern, same stages, same brutal outcome. The timeline compresses. The ledger always balances, and it balances in blood. The second pattern. When currency fails, economies revert to pure barter, and only utility matters, not sentiment, not tradition, not what something used to be worth, only what it does right now. In Venezuela today, as I'm speaking these words, fishermen at a beach resort called Patanimo exchange their daily catch for rice, plantains, and bananas. People walk from nearby towns carrying food because the fishermen won't accept bolivars anymore. One fisherman stated it directly to a reporter. Money doesn't buy anything. So it's better for people to bring food so we can give them fish. That's not an economic theory. That's a man trying to feed his children. Farmers travel hundreds of kilometers to Caracas. They carry 200 bananas, 30 kilos of yams, 30 kilos of cassava, 40 kilos of lemons. They're not selling these goods for currency. They're exchanging them directly for flour, rice, or pasta. The monetary system has collapsed. The ledger has reverted to its most primitive form, direct exchange of tangible value. In the coffee-growing regions, hardware stores openly accept coffee beans as payment. 3 100-kilo sacks of coffee trade for 200 liters of gasoline. Coffee beans have become currency because they're standardized, they're consumable, they have use value. This is economic reversion. Modern collapse sends societies backward through time to pre-industrial barter systems. And in that environment, gold becomes useless. You can't eat it. You can't burn it for warmth. You can't use it to purify water or treat an infected wound. But the person who can grow food survives. The person who can repair a water pump survives. The person who stockpiled antibiotics and basic hygiene supplies survives. The person clutching gold bars waits for civilization to return. And sometimes it doesn't. The third pattern. The Great Depression proved that land and skills trump everything. Now we're taught that the Great Depression was about stock market crashes and bank failures. That's the surface. The real story is in the soil. Farmers during the Depression struggled. Crop prices fell to devastating lows. Some burned corn as fuel because it was cheaper than coal. But farmers with productive land possessed an irreplaceable advantage. They could produce their own food regardless of what money was doing. Documented experiences from rural Iowa show farm families raised large gardens with vegetables. They canned fruit from orchards. They produced milk and cream from dairy cattle. They supplied themselves with meat and eggs from chickens. They bought flour and sugar in 50-pound sacks and baked their own bread. Farm wives made clothing from cloth cut from flour and feed sacks. Zero cash income. They survived anyway. Meanwhile, urban families were destitute. In Dubuque, Iowa, 2,200 workers lost their jobs between 1927 and 1934. Those workers, even if they'd somehow maintained their pre-depression wages, which dropped 30% nominally, faced genuine hunger. Because they had no productive capacity. They were dependent on a monetary system that had stopped functioning. One grandfather left a comment on my last video. He said it perfectly. My grandfather survived the Great Depression because he had a small 4-acre farm plus carpentry and painting skills. Not gold, not bank savings, land and skills. Land. Here's the kicker that nobody talks about. Victory gardens during World War II proved this principle at scale. More than 20 million gardens were planted in 1943 alone. They produced 10 billion pounds of food. 40% of the entire United States vegetable supply came from backyard gardens. 2/3 of those gardens were in towns, cities, and suburban areas. By 1944, more than half of Americans growing gardens reported doing so out of economic need. Not patriotic motivation. They needed to eat. The mechanism is mathematical. Farmland produces income regardless of economic conditions. Crops, rental value, direct food. The academic data is brutal. Farmland increased 17% in value during the 2008 to 2009 financial crisis, while the S&P 500 declined 46%. Between 2000 and 2009, the S&P 500 posted negative returns in 28 different quarters. In 26 of those 28 quarters when stocks declined, farmland posted positive returns. This isn't speculation. This is insurance. The fourth pattern. Skills became survival capital. And the list is very specific. The Depression-era survival strategies read like a catalogue of practical production. People caught and sold fish, made homemade fudge, grew and sold berries, started lunch wagons, shoveled snow, made and sold hand-woven baskets, made and sold quilts, mended and altered clothes, washed windows, rendered lard, butchered animals, preserved food by canning. Notice something. Every single item on that list involves creating or processing something of tangible value: food, clothing, shelter-related services. The skills that commanded the highest value were those addressing fundamental human needs: food production and preservation, clothing production and repair, shelter improvement, health care, mechanical repair. A person who could slaughter an animal, preserve meat through smoking, or can vegetables possessed income-generating skills that no economic collapse could eliminate. Doctors, nurses, and dentists remained employed throughout the Depression. People found ways to compensate them, even when currency was unreliable. They traded goods and services for medical care, because a broken leg doesn't care about the stock market. Here's what gold critics always miss. A skilled carpenter represents a valuable asset that cannot be stored in a vault. The skill exists in the person. It can be deployed whenever needed. Gold just sits in a safe, producing absolutely nothing. The fifth pattern. Selko's testimony reveals what actually traded in total collapse. When currency became worthless in the Bosnian siege, certain items emerged as supremely valuable. Ammunition ranked highest because people needed it for hunting and self-defense. But Selko warned against trading it freely. He said, "Whatever you sell to another person in the way of a weapon may be used on you by that person the next day." Security considerations dominate all trading decisions in real collapse scenarios. Hygiene items held remarkable value. Bleach could purify hundreds of gallons of water, worth far more than its pre-war cost suggested. Bars of soap, toothpaste, feminine hygiene products. They commanded extraordinary prices. A single bar of soap that cost 50 cents before the war traded for a dozen eggs during the siege. Medicine held even higher value. Antibiotics, pain relievers, first aid supplies. Many people died from lack of access to basic medications that cost pennies before the war. But here's the revelation that changes everything. Selko explicitly recommends owning 1,000 disposable BIC lighters rather than a fuel-powered generator. Let that sink in for a moment. A generator costs thousands of dollars. Why would lighters be better? A generator makes noise. It consumes fuel. It requires maintenance. And it attracts deadly attention from those who might kill you to steal it. Lighters are silent. They're portable. They're distributed across multiple units, so losing some doesn't leave you without fire-starting capability. They're cheap to acquire right now, and they can be refilled if you have the setup. Small practical items addressing fundamental needs hold more reliable value than spectacular technological solutions. Selko had a large propane tank rigged to refill disposable BIC lighters. He traded filled lighters for food, candles, and other necessities. The insight is profound. A lighter provides fire. Fire gives you heating, cooking, and light. In a siege environment where there's no electricity and no gas, these functions are non-negotiable. And here's what destroys the conventional wisdom. Gold and jewelry held extremely poor value during the crisis itself. Selko notes that warlords took precious metals from desperate people at can-of-soup value. The warlords understood metals would retain value once the crisis ended, but they were worthless for immediate survival. The sixth pattern. Venezuela provides real-time proof happening right now. This isn't historical theory. Venezuela's economic collapse is unfolding as we speak. One woman named Keela Oval grows eggplant, tomato, and passion fruit in her backyard, specifically for bartering. She exchanges produce for pasta, sugar, milk, or rice. She noted this lifestyle mirrors exactly how her family lived in the early 20th century. Modern economic collapse reverts societies to pre-modern economic modes. The ledger goes backward. A fisherman in Patanimo stated this to a journalist. "I haven't been to the city center in almost 2 years. What would I do there? I don't have enough money to buy a shirt or a pair of shorts. I'm better off here swapping things to survive." Official currency became so useless that the effort to obtain it through wage labor wasn't worth the return. Think about that. Working for money became economically irrational. In Zimbabwe's parallel collapse, black market medicines exploded in value. Antibiotics, which cost a few dollars in stable countries, commanded black market prices at multiples of their original cost. A single dose of amoxicillin could be worth weeks of wages. Those who stockpiled basic antibiotics, bandages, pain relievers, and antiseptic materials held extremely valuable assets. Relative to their cost and storage requirements, they were gold. Contrast this with precious metals. A person with a pound of silver couldn't use it to treat an infected wound, couldn't eat it, couldn't burn it for heat. But a bottle of antibiotics could literally mean the difference between life and death. If you're realizing that everything you thought you knew about economic security is wrong, hit that subscribe button right now. This channel is Financial Forensics. I perform autopsies on dead empires so you can see the patterns before they repeat in your backyard. Drop a comment with what you want me to investigate next. I read every single one. The seventh pattern. Community networks are the overlooked asset that determines who survives. Meta-analytic studies across 148 studies with over 300,000 participants found that individuals with stronger social relationships had a 50% increased likelihood of survival. 50%. That effect size is statistically comparable to quitting smoking, and it exceeds many established risk factors for mortality. This isn't soft social science. This is survival data. Selko's account emphasizes this repeatedly. He notes that almost all trades were made in private arrangements, after you got information about someone who had something they wanted to trade. And the best situation was if you knew that person before the war. So you had already built trust beforehand. Trust-based relationships become economic infrastructure when formal systems collapse. One commenter said it perfectly: an Amish community that shares and helps each other. Community is the one thing missing from many survival strategies. Exactly right. Communities with established structures survived better. Neighborhood organizations, churches, mutual aid networks, they coordinated responses, they pooled resources, they provided support far more effectively than isolated households. In Venezuela, communities informally organized food sharing and barter networks that helped distribute scarce resources. In Bosnia, communities organized around trusted leaders to manage security, allocate resources, and coordinate survival strategies. For contemporary preparedness, this means developing real relationships with neighbors, participating in community organizations. Building trust-based networks should rank as high as stockpiling supplies. Social capital is survival capital. The eighth pattern. The comparative analysis destroys gold's claim as collapse insurance. Let me show you gold's fundamental problem. In the Bosnian siege, where the economic system collapsed most completely, gold held virtually no value during the crisis itself. The fundamental problem is this: gold produces no income, and it addresses no immediate survival need. Food feeds you. Tools allow you to produce and repair. Skills generate services people will trade for. But gold is inedible. It's non-functional. And it's only valuable if someone else wants to trade for it. In the early stages of collapse, when people are desperate for food, tools, and medicine, gold is not what they want. Gold only regains relevance later, when civilization stabilizes around a new economic equilibrium. The problem is obvious. Someone holding only gold must endure the entire crisis without income, food production, or a means of survival, while others generate value from productive assets. History makes this clear. During the 2008 financial crisis, farmland increased in value by 17%, while the S&P 500 fell 46%. Gold declined initially before recovering. Farmland, meanwhile, continued producing income through rent, crop sales, and direct food production, regardless of what financial markets were doing. The math is brutal. From 1992 to 2020, farmland volatility averaged 6.84%, less than half the S&P 500's 16.9%, and far below gold's 14.8%. During high inflation periods, farmland delivered average annual returns of 14.67%, more than double the inflation rate itself. This isn't theory. It's documented history. The warning signs are already here. Venezuela is in full collapse. Barter economy. Currency worthless. Turkey is advancing through stage 3 as citizens flee the lira. Lebanon hit stage 4 when banks froze accounts and the currency lost 98% of its value. And then there's the United States. $38 trillion in debt, permanent deficits, and interest payments now exceeding military spending. Central banks are buying gold at the fastest pace since 1996. One commenter said, "This won't be isolated collapses, but a system-wide failure." On that point, they're exactly right. For the first time in modern history, 100% of the world's currencies are fiat, backed by nothing tangible. In a globally interconnected system, the collapse of major currencies won't happen in isolation. It will be simultaneous, a domino effect, a systemic failure. The warning signs are already visible. So the real question is simple. What do you do? The Amish Hedge isn't about gold. It's a diversified survival strategy built on 5 core elements. First, productive land. Even a small vegetable garden creates food security and teaches irreplaceable skills. In Venezuela, rooftop and backyard gardens became lifelines when money stopped working. You don't need acres. Start small. Start now. Second, practical skills. Food production, animal care, preservation, repair work, and first aid. These skills can't be inflated away, frozen, or confiscated. They remain valuable under any economic system. Third, practical goods with real utility. Medical supplies, tools, hygiene items, batteries, and preserved food. In collapse scenarios, these don't just retain value, they become currency. Fourth, community. Real relationships with people who have useful skills and resources. Knowing who can fix equipment, treat injuries, or grow food is a form of insurance no bank can offer. Finally, precious metals, but only after the first 4 are secured. Gold may help after stability returns, not during the collapse itself. History is clear. Bosnia, Venezuela, Zimbabwe, the Great Depression. Survival depends on productive capacity, skills, and community, not savings accounts. Collapse isn't a question of if. It's whether you prepare before you're forced to.